Good morning, everybody. I am in Bluffton, Ohio this weekend to preach at First Mennonite Church in Bluffton this morning and to speak at Bluffton University on Tuesday. But I am excited to start Advent and wanted to do the sermon even though I'm not there. As many of you know, we are using Expecting Emmanuel, the Advent devotional I wrote for our worship outline for this Advent season, and I'm excited to walk with you and to walk with the women of Jesus genealogy through Advent this year. As always, Advent kind of snuck up on me and it is already here. We are entering the season together. We heard this morning the story of Tamar. She is the first woman listed in Jesus' genealogy, and it is quite a story. I would say it is a soap opera worthy story, and there are lots of pieces that we could dig into. Some of you are participating in some small group discussions. You may get into some of the other aspects. But I want to really focus right now on the aspect of waiting, because that's what the season of Advent is for many of us. It's a time of waiting. I mean, in the secular world, we're waiting to have Christmas, to open presents and have the big meal. We may even have Advent calendars counting down the days. And in the church, we are waiting for the birth of Christ. We are in this time of expectation of God with us in the person of Jesus. So it's a time of waiting, and I think that Tamar's story has a lot to teach us about waiting, or has some interesting insights into what it means to wait. A lot of what is happening with Tamar after her first husband dies and then the brother dies, Tamar enters this period of waiting, right? She's waiting for Shelah, the youngest brother, to be of age, to be old enough to marry her, to carry on the line for his older brother. And this first part of waiting that Tamar does is a natural, necessary kind of waiting, to wait for him to be old enough. It is a kind of waiting. In Advent, we think of pregnancy, right? Which is a necessary waiting. There is a set time that it takes. And you wait. That's just what you do. And that's just what Tamar had to do, was wait for Shelah to be old enough. But then there's a point where that shifted, right? Because at some point he is old enough. And yet Judah, her father-in-law, is still not allowing Tamar to marry him, is still not giving Tamar the opportunity for a family that she has been promised. And that is the point of where the waiting becomes not natural and healthy, but problematic. Judah forcing her to wait becomes a form of abuse almost. It's a denial, it's an injustice against her, because she is not free to marry someone else. And without being married, she does not have prospects for supporting herself. So Judah is doing her an injustice by making her wait beyond the time that Shelah is of age. And Tamar recognizes this. So it seems that she waits patiently in the beginning, but there is that point where she realizes Judah is not doing right by her, and that the waiting has become harmful for her. And so she makes a plan. Right? She finds a way to carry on the family line, to gain the protection and the support of the family that owes her that protection and that support by becoming pregnant by Judah and bearing his children. And in the context of the scripture and the time period here, the fact that Tamar is pregnant with twin boys, is a sign of God's blessing, is a sign of God's approval of her taking the steps that she takes to get through her waiting, to stop the waiting process, to get unstuck, and to move towards justice for herself in this situation. And so I'm really intrigued by this idea of the different types of waiting. That there's waiting we need to do, waiting that is natural, waiting that is healthy, that is part of the rhythm of how things work, right? That we have a pregnancy, we wait to be of an age to go to college, to drive a car. There are things we wait for that we just have to wait for. But then there are things we wait for that we may need to stop waiting and take action about. And this could be in the realm of an illness, a mental illness, a physical illness. That's so hard to know, right? If you're feeling sick, do you just wait it out? Will your body eventually fight off whatever the virus is and you'll be fine? Or do you need to proactively take steps to make yourself better? It can be hard to know what is the natural, necessary waiting and when is the time to take action. And that's not just on a personal level either, right? It's true in a church context. We've been through a lot with our building process, and even now we've got a parking lot plan and thinking about when to shift worship times. The coordinating committee decided to go ahead and try this new worship schedule experiment during Advent, and there was some concern on the committee that Advent might not be the best time to try something new because there's a lot going on anyway. And I will be honest, it's been a little rough couple of weeks starting Advent, starting a new worship schedule, all the things that have been happening and shifting. But we also felt like everyone had waited long enough. You all waited for me on my sabbatical to do some of my exploration and research about worship times. And we just felt like it had been enough waiting, that it was time to take actions, to take steps towards getting unstuck, because I think a lot of us have felt a little bit stuck in the way we've been doing worship. So churches have this, and other communities too, have this discernment about what is natural waiting and what is not, what is waiting we need to put an end to. And of course in society we have this, and I think sometimes it's just easier to wait. We just feel like we'll wait for things to get better, but then there's a realization that the people in power aren't of their own accord just going to magically do the right thing and make the things all better. This is a lot of the work that Justice Matters does is trying to push past the waiting. We're seeing this with the Mental Health Crisis Center that we so desperately need. And we voted for the funding for it. And I think most all of us were just waiting for it to happen until suddenly we saw some news reports and realized it's not actually happening the way that it should be, the way that we want it to be. And maybe we need to step in. Maybe we need to stop waiting passively and step in. And it's hard to figure that out, because the reality is starting a crisis center is very complicated. it does take time. It takes specific steps. It takes people in Topeka doing some things which we all know can take forever and a day. So there is some legitimacy to when people in power say it's complicated, it's going to take time, you have to be patient. That is very true to a certain point. And how do we know when that point is reached and when we need to step in and do, maybe, if we think of the story of Tamar, I mean, not specifically what Tamar does, but the general idea of sometimes we have to be creative, right? We don't just have to take action, but if we're in a position of less power, we have to take risks and we have to be creative. We have to be brave. And Tamar is rewarded for that. And I think we can be too. That is a faithful way to be in the world, to recognize when the time for waiting is over and to assess the situation and take action in the ways that are available to us to bring justice, whether it's justice for ourselves or justice for other people around us. It's interesting because Tamar's story doesn't explicitly mention God, so we have to think about, for ourselves, figure out, where is God in this story? Where is God acting? Where is God's presence? And I see God's presence with Tamar in her waiting. I see that she is guided to understand when she needs to stop waiting and take action. And in the action she takes, I see her faithfulness and her commitment to God as she seeks justice for herself. And so in this Advent season of waiting, I pray that we can wait with Tamar and we can wait like Tamar, having a deep sense of peace and of patience during the time of necessary waiting, and having the conviction and the guidance of the Spirit and the willingness to take risks and the creativity that we need when the time comes to stop waiting and to act according to God's leading for God's justice in the world.